Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis, and you are watching Season 3 of Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsors, Make Some Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Make Some is here to make it easy, from their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support. Make Some is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns, some of them you even heard about on this very show. They currently offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Make Some can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to makesome.com. And right now, listeners of this show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. So that is mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount on your first order. Also, I am sponsored by BCW Supplies. So please at checkout, use code POPANIMECOMICS to get 10% off your order. Bags, boards, long boxes are all expensive. So please go use that code to save some money, and it's very much appreciated. And of course, I got a Kickstarter going on, so you can check that out as well. And now that all my sponsorships are done here, without further ado, I have with me comic creator, and I'm going to try to get your name right, so correct me if I'm wrong, Nina Daisy Aberlein. So
Aberlein.
Aberlein. I was close.
Uh-huh.
I was close.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to get it wrong. I openly said you could correct me. So getting it wrong, so welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am very excited to actually have you because you're in the middle of your Kickstarter campaign. You're already funded, and I know a bunch of people who are going to see this in my audience know your project and know something about your project, but a good part of my audience probably doesn't. So what is the basic concept of your comic, just to catch everybody up before we really dive into the story?
So if you like harpies, if you like falcons, if you like drama, if you like girls kissing, then you like Sunrise Blossom.
Well, there we go. We can end it right there. No, because obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's very much a manga hybrid comic, the way I view it. And it was also very much a webtoon, and there's a lot of stuff going on where we have Ivy, who is a very young falcon harpy, abandoned by her mom, sort of raised by a family of owls. Mm-hmm. And, well, the story goes from there, and pretty much, she sort of gets separated from her sister, and then she discovers a human. And so what was this like really building this out? And I'm giving a very, very, very broad definition of this story. And obviously she sort of develops a relationship with a human, and it gets a little hot and heated, for lack of a better word. And then stuff happens, and we're sort of dealing with all that. So I know I'm giving a very general sense of the story, and clearly I'm being very, very vague in describing this, and I'm probably doing a poor job. But what was the idea behind even building this out? Because you are touching on some very interesting ideas that we're going to dive into in a second.
Well, I really like monster girls, like half human, half animal creatures. Gosh, okay, let me take a step back a second and reorganize my thoughts. So I really, really, really like monster girls. And I just wanted to write my own story about them. And so 3 years ago, while I was in comic school, I started a small project about, a human and a harpy. And gradually that project grew and grew. And 3 years later, what I initially assumed to be a small couple-page thing turned out to be a hundreds of pages long project that is going pretty well so far.
Yeah, because obviously it's very much going, and everybody's hitting up my entire DMs at the moment and my text messages. Thanks, everybody, first and foremost. But even going further into this, because obviously you started on Webtoons. Mm-hmm. And so what was that like? Because producing a webtoon is in a lot of ways an easy way how to get into comics, because you don't have to go through a traditional publisher. You can sort of just throw it up onto the internet and then people can read it. And webtoons is complicated because some of it's sort of behind a paywall, but sometimes it's not behind a paywall. But if you just want your stuff being read or you even want feedback, it's a very easy way how to distribute it. For like, not saying making a comic is easy. I don't think that's what, because making a comic, you're doing 1 page a week, it's still complicated, but the distribution side of it on webtoons is a hell of a lot easier. So what was that like, just throwing stuff up and seeing what people are reacting to? Because the Kickstarter is dealing with the first time of this stuff getting published.
Well, I started on Webtoons mostly because I didn't want to wait, like, I don't know, 2 years or so before they like sharing my work around, and also because I know that the style that I kind of work with and my audience reads a lot more comics online than they do from a comic store. And so I published on Webtoons because it is the biggest online webcomic sharing platform. But ever since, especially ever since the pandemic started and a lot more people were stuck in their homes with nothing to do, it grew really saturated. As in, like, there are so many people posting there that have absolutely no idea what they're doing. And so, like, unless your comic is like extraordinarily good, it doesn't stand out at all because there are so many people posting there. And so I pretty much post there to like share my work, gather an audience, and network, make friends, and see pretty much how the general public likes my work. And bit by bit, slowly, in the past 3 years, I've got currently almost 2,000 subscribers, and compared to many other comics, it's going pretty decently.
So to even talk about that, because obviously I'm in the podcast game,
Mm-hmm.
and on my first show I do very well, and this show is not in podcast form yet, but that's also a very saturated market. And I know that, getting attention and getting drive and getting people interested is very complicated. And what has that been like for you? Because obviously I feel that everybody sort of sees, oh, I can make a comic, I can make something happen, I can make, this work for me, and somebody is doing really well, they're making money on this, and then people jump
Mm-hmm.
in and not everything is good quality. It's happened in the podcast world where there are people who start a podcast and it's just a little inside information where they get 20 episodes in and then they don't ever produce a 21st episode, but that stuff doesn't get taken down. And so what has that been like? Because it seems that it's a broken component of webtoons and comics in general.
It's exactly what you said with the web podcast, but with the webtoons, because there are so many people who are like, "Oh, you can post comics here, and like you can post whatever you want." And there are some people making money off webtoons. I'll try it, but getting to the point where webtoons pays you for the stuff you do is really difficult. Like, you need minimum 1,000 subscribers, and that's relatively doable. And you need at least 40,000 monthly page views, which is like every single month, which is like really, really, really difficult to achieve. And not everyone at all, like a very, very small percentage of people who post on Webtoons are even able to get to the point where they're able to make money off their work. And in fact, most people who do get money through their Webtoon don't get it through Webtoon, but they get it through Patreon. So, like, maybe if you share your Patreon, there are going to be some people who enjoy the story and maybe want to give you, like, I don't know, $3 a month. And I've made like a lot more money through Patreon than I have through webcomic platforms and advertisements.
Yeah, I could imagine that. It's kind of with sponsorships and podcasting where
Yeah.
I'm making more money now with sponsorships, and I'm trying to lock up more deals because I tried having a Patreon, I have a buy me a coffee, and it just doesn't work. But a sponsorship deal works. And, it's just one of those things. And then every once in a while, people will throw me buy me a coffee or something like that. But, it's tricky. And so I completely get it. And obviously, I'm not producing a webtoon comic or web comic right now, but it's very similar, but it's also extremely different. So I don't want to conflate ideas here, but obviously, you've now migrated into Kickstarter
Mm-hmm.
and actually producing a physical book.
Yep,
And
and I'm currently kickstarting my second volume.
and I know this is your first Kickstarter, but I do want to talk about the story first and foremost. This way we can whet everybody's appetite a little bit because there's a lot of shit going on in your book, for lack of a better word. And I say this politely, where it's this idea that you're dealing with a lot of complicated issues,
Mm-hmm.
and in particular with Ivy, who is sort of this harpy falcon or falcon harpy. I'm not too sure exactly what her species slash bird type is, but obviously sort of the first issue and what drew me to your project is that she's dealing with some mommy issues and being abandoned and adoption and things of that nature. And we don't really see that much in comics all that often. Obviously we know that Batman is an orphan, but we don't really deal with the complications of lack of parenthood and what that does
Yeah.
to your interests and who you are and how you feel and coming into adulthood. And obviously, Ivy's mom abandoned her when she was young. So, what was that like really building that component out? Because it does affect the rest of the story.
Well, I wanted to include a lot of family dynamics in the story itself. And the way that Ivy relates to different members of her family, like she has wonderful relationships with everyone in her family that she knows is part of her family, at least, is wonderful and different with everyone. So the relationship she has with her adoptive mother, the relationship she has with her adoptive sister, with her brother, they're all very different, but they're genuine and beautiful and also very realistic because they're kind of based off my own relationship with my family and siblings. Though I wanted to, add a little bit more spice to it, I would guess, because while Ivy was technically abandoned by her birth parents, she does minor spoiler. She does meet both of them in the first volume without knowing who they are at all. And even at the current point in the story, in the second volume, she doesn't know the those people who she has met on several occasions are the people who did the waka waka and and had her pretty much. And it's also something that it adds a little bit more drama. It adds a little bit more spice, and adds a little bit more like I don't know how to put it, but like gasp value a bit. So like the scene in which she walks into her biological father's house and she's introduced to members of the household, and then we see that the owner of the house is her biological dad, but the reader knows and she doesn't know. And I remember when I posted that on Webtoons, everyone was like, ah. And the same thing when she is
What is
reintroduced
this
to.
like for you then to have it so that she doesn't know and she's not aware of who her parents are, but everybody else does? Because it's very interesting when the main character doesn't know.
And
And
the reader does.
and also gives a little foreshadowing, and I don't know if we're gonna find out or if she's ever gonna find out what's going on. And then there's also rationale and reasoning why they might have abandoned her that we may or may not know at this point in the story. And the reason why I'm speaking this way is that, and I'm asking these questions and phrasing it as a question, is that some of this stuff is sort of answered and some of it is not in the webtoon. And given the fact that a bunch of people probably have not read the webtoon and are going to be reading this stuff for the first time, I think is why I'm leaving it very vague.
Yeah, yeah. But it's something that, like, both for myself and as far as many of my readers, at least from what they tell me, both on social media, in the comments and stuff forth, is something that is exciting. Because, like, every single moment in which Ivy is interacting with her birth parents, but she doesn't know who they are. Every single moment is like, oh, is she gonna find out? Is she gonna find out? Is she gonna put 2 plus 2? Is the parent going to find out? Are they going to understand? And then maybe when you see said parent showing affection and warmth and familiarity to Ivy without knowing their at least biological relationship, it's just something that like builds tension and is able to pull readers in and like keep them there for a little while longer because it's got like that tension stuck in the throat. But it's just one of the many dramatical elements present in the comic. So also the relationship that Ivy has with the humans in her life, the relationship
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. So obviously, I'm going to drop a little bit of a spoiler, but I don't think it's a big one. Ivy and Violet have somewhat of a relationship. Violet found Ivy, and their relationship as a couple is growing, and certain things are happening. And so, what was that like really building that out? Because obviously, it gets really interesting because you're now not dealing with any more a girl on girl relationship and an LGBTQ relationship. You're also dealing with sort of a species and relationship, and this stuff gets super interesting. So what was that like really building that out? Because both of them are coming into adulthood, into sexuality, figuring out who they are, what they're doing. Can it work is a great question to throw out there. And maybe I'm psychoanalyzing this book a little too much. I'll be the
No,
first
that's
to admit
fun.
it. But
It's really fun when people psychoanalyze other
there's a
people's
lot
work.
of stuff going on. And so what was that really like building this relationship out and building these characters out? Because this isn't anymore just a simple little, high school girl crush. This is obviously coming into a very complicated environment and relationship.
Well, it's something that they are both slowly growing towards together. Because at the beginning of the story, Ivy does not even know what homosexuality is. She doesn't know that's a thing that exists. She grew up with Disney movies, and the closest thing to gay there was Sebastian in The Little Mermaid. So she had no idea what any of that meant or if it even was an option. While Violet herself, at the beginning of the story, had completely shut out her attraction to women due to trauma that she had experienced beforehand, and has a crush on a male co-worker with whom she later on gradually develops a relationship with. But the way that both of them are kind of like rocks for each other, and both of them are kind of like they look towards each other when they need each other pretty much, and they're there for each other, and they're both growing together in the same direction, and they're both facing very different problems and both dealing with different type of trauma. But because of the way they're dealing with it together and moving towards it together is the reason why their relationship is slowly becoming something that is strong, solid, and works, and pretty much triumphs over the other romantic relationships present in the story.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I don't want to dive too much into it, but I am very curious because obviously, and I don't know how much you know about my show, but I had David Boer on, who just did Killer Queens for Dark Horse, and he does Canto, and obviously he's a gay man. And I think Killer Queens is one of the only books that sort of mainstream that has a completely gay cast writing and doing the art and doing all the cover work. And, what is that like to really write this comic and really focus on this theme? Because I feel, and maybe I'm completely wrong, that there's not a lot of focus on LGBTQ comics and representation. And to have that representation, what is that like? Because I think you're hitting a very interesting nail on its head. You're also doing it in not, and pardon me for speaking slightly out of turn, but you're not, I guess, tokenizing it, for lack of a better word, where you're just treating it like a regular relationship. And it's not becoming like a hentai. It's not, meant to raise, highlighting. I don't view it as advocacy. I just view it, hey, it's just another story. So what was that like? Because I think that's what people want. And I think that's what a lot of people want to say. Hey, I just want a good story that has these elements versus saying, I need these elements and then the good story needs to come. So what was that like for you? Because I think it's very interesting.
Well, there are a lot of girls love and boys love comics out there, but the issue with many of them is that many of them heavily fetishize homosexual relationships. And in many of those stories, like there's a homosexual main cast, and that's it, nothing else. And that's like, while those can be entertaining to read at times, they're not real. They don't feel real. And what I wanted to do with a diverse cast, and not diverse because, like, I don't know, token black person, token gay person, token ace person. I wanted to show what, how things really are in life. Like, not all my characters are gay, not all my characters are straight. And the way that also Ivy, the main character, slowly comes to terms with her attraction to a woman and later understands that this is something that is normal, this is something that is okay. I wanted to show a natural and realistic approach to these themes. So even how she comes out to a friend of hers as homosexual, and her friend is like, "Yeah, I actually knew all along. It was pretty obvious." And how a friend of hers is like, "You know what? While we're here, I may as well tell you I'm asexual, but like not in the sense of like, yeah, an extra token character, or like, yeah, I just made her asexual just because it's good to have as many LGBT characters as possible, because that's not true, but that's because it's how the world is. Like, I have a lot of characters that are straight, and I have a couple characters who are gay, one transgender minor character in the background, one asexual character who is a friend of the main character, and a lot of straight people as well, because that's how the world is. There are a lot of straight people. LGBT community is a minority compared to the number of straight people there is in the world, but they are there and they exist and they matter just as much. And that's something that I wanted to show.
Yeah, no, because one of the things that I'm reading in comics right now, the reason why I bring all this up is that I find that, as I was stating, that just people throw characters into things and they're not necessarily, as they say, hey, I just need this element in there. And they're not so focused on the story, or they don't even have a battle plan with that character. And I find that there's a lot of lazy writing right now. And I think it's a real issue. And I think a lot of people are catching on and saying, like, what the hell am I reading here? Where I want a diverse cast. Obviously, there's all sorts of people in the world, but now the question becomes is that I just don't want a character being there for the sake of the character having to be there or for having diversity, because I've read stories that have nothing to do where it's a war story. And so having diversity in a war story doesn't make any sense if it's a bunch of guys storming the beach in Normandy. But at the same time, when I'm reading, a manga, if it there makes sense and it fits, that's kind of where I'm at. Or I'm reading, an indie comic and there's all sorts of characters in there. So I think that's something that people are getting really frustrated with in comics right now. And I think it's a real problem, I think. And I think indie is trying to solve it. But I also think that, not to get too political, but people are very, very, very freaked out about saying, what can I include in a book? What can I include in a book? Because people get bent out of shape on things. So obviously there's a lot of stuff that goes on with this, but that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it, because I think it's a really, really hot button issue right now.
And I get it. I'm honestly also kind of tired of both comics, movies, TV series, animated series with skinny white dude with brown hair as a protagonist, token best friend black guy who is nerdy, either white girl or Latina girl who is actually a badass and can use weapons, who is the main character's love interest, and buff guy who everyone thinks is a mean jock but then turns out to be nice. That's like, I've described so many freaking series and comics and movies just with that, and it's kind of boring at this point.
Yeah, no, and I think clearly you sort of have wanted to go down a different path, completely versing that. where you have decided to sort of, I guess, flip the script a little bit up, and you're obviously throwing the relationship stuff in there, and you've thrown, obviously, we have LGBTQ, we have coming into adulthood being thrown into this, we have relationship stuff going on. Obviously, gonna slightly run a little spoiler. Things are complicated between Ivy and Violet, and issue or slash volume 2 really sort of starts hashing this out and dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously I don't want to dive too much further into that because I don't want to ruin it. But even coming into this idea that their relationship and them understanding where they're going and things of that nature. And so what was that like that you actually sort of, I don't know if this is truly an adult book, meaning like, I don't think there's no nudity or anything like that, but it's also, it's, I guess the way I read the book is that I feel like it's PG-13 and up, where a 13-year-old can get it, but I don't think it's a N-17 book, for lack of a
No,
better.
definitely. Like, honestly, this kind of book I would have loved when I was maybe 12 or 13. Younger, I probably wouldn't have appreciated as much because of, themes, art, and so forth. But I'd say from young teens to maybe mid 40s is a pretty good target audience.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's sort of the niche in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways, where definitely young teens, I think, is where it should be, and that. And I do want to back out of the story a little bit because I don't want to ruin too much about this story, what's going on with it. Obviously, I want people to either read it on Webtoons or actually back the Kickstarter. But I am curious, and sort of teased and talked about this, and I'm very curious because obviously, as I stated, you started out on
Mm-hmm.
Webtoons, but now you've migrated to Kickstarter. And so I am very curious about what that was like, and even making that decision and coming into, Kickstarter and going down that path, because obviously Webtoons hits a certain niche, but now you have a lot of content. And what prompted you to want to go onto Kickstarter and go into self-publishing and actually produce a volumes 1 and 2 at the same time on Kickstarter? Because
Well,
Kickstarter is a beast.
I did do a second crowdfunding campaign for Volume 1, but I did that on Indiegogo. But because of several issues, mostly related to like a lot of people having their card declined, like and it like frustratingly amount a frustratingly big amount of people getting their credit card declined on Indiegogo, I decided to do the next one on Kickstarter. And well, I publish, I would say mostly on Webtoon, both to gather my audience and to get almost live feedback as I am working on my comic. But also, I went to conventions a lot. And of course, I want to share my comic, which is my biggest work at conventions. But I am a teacher and I am broke, so I can't print them out of pocket. So I started looking into crowdfunding, promoting, getting it on Indiegogo and Kickstarter, mainly so that I could print it and also have something to, give to my grandmother for Christmas and something that I can bring to conventions.
Yeah, and even go further into this, because obviously this is your first Kickstarter. I'm in the middle of my first Kickstarter.
Hmm.
I got funded like 3 days ago, so
Awesome.
yeah, it's exciting, and I'm trying to push hard. But the way I've been getting money is like every 5 days I get like 20% out of nowhere, and then I'm dead in the water, and then I get like another 20%.
Ooh.
It's kind of weird, but if you look at the graph, it looks like a reverse six flag. Is the way I describe it. But what was that like? Because Kickstarter is very different than Indiegogo. It's different than producing a webtoon comic. I run an eBay business. It's different from that. I've tried looking at places like ClickFunnels. It is different than that, and it is a whole different ball game. And so, what has that experience been like for you coming into Kickstarter, coming into the Kickstarter community, and even being part of Kickstarter? Because it is very different, and it is a beast unto itself. And I've learned that the hard way. And I'm funding a podcast, which is slightly different than comics, but even still, just I'm comic-esque, for lack of a better word. So it's a
Hmm.
weird position for me as an individual. And I'm curious how you have had your experience and even coming into it and that transition, because it's very different. And there's a lot of stuff that's complicated about Kickstarter. I've learned the hard way.
Well, I was rather, I would say maybe lucky with my first campaign because I have a friend, Mike Jimmy Lorsha de Brun, whom I was friendly with because we frequented a couple similar Discord servers, and so we became friends through there. And he does mostly crowdfunding indie comics, and he like self publishes a lot, pretty much all of his comics. And so when I told him that I was interested in crowdfunding my comic, he was like, "Oh, awesome! Let me help you." And like he pretty much like pulled me into his own network of like crowdfunders, podcasts, online shows, and so it was also thanks to him that I was able to like go to a lot of my very first like online shows, podcasts, interviews, and so forth, and also helped me like set up my Indiegogo page, and so I was able to get my first experience pretty much, like with my hand being held and like kind of like dragged, no, not dragged, but like guided through most of the process. And I learned a lot, like a lot with that first campaign, like both positively and negatively, with those positive and negative experiences. And based on the experience of that first campaign that I had in May of 2021 for my first volume, I was able, to learn a lot and improve even further while preparing for the Kickstarter campaign for my second volume.
And even going into that, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously I've had a very weird Kickstarter experience where I've had a lot more pushback on my podcast. I've had people like attacking me, and it's been a weird experience for me where I enjoy Kickstarter's platform, but
Mm-hmm.
I would run a funnel very differently, and I view Kickstarter like a funnel, and I
Mm-hmm.
love funnelytics, and so I'm going to be building a business on ClickFunnels, and the way I'm going to run that business, I'm going to run that business downstream, and Kickstarter is not a downstream funnel. Anybody who understands funnelytics knows exactly what I'm talking about. So Kickstarter is a funnel that has 15 exits, which is not how I would run a campaign personally, because I actually think it's detrimental and I actually think it's anti-human psychology. But even still, for me, it's been both weird because people have been positive to me, but a lot of people have been really pushing back on a lot of my rewards. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? The thing's up. Like, so for me and my first one on Kickstarter, it's been a mixed bag. And I'm very curious because now this is your first one, and it seems that you've had a very different experience than I have had.
Well, because of a similar experience that I had with Indiegogo, I prepared a lot before I launched. So, like, I contacted a shit ton of people, was ignored a lot, was also, like, bad mouthed a bit. Like, there was this one person who has, like, a pretty successful YouTube show that, like, promotes indie comics. And with my first campaign, they didn't see the messages in time, and they said, "Oh, sorry, I missed your messages. Better luck with the next campaign. Let us know when the next one goes live, and maybe if we like the material, we'll help you promote it." And so I messaged them, and they were like, "Oh no, sorry, we don't promote material that has this type of content." And at first I was like, "Wait, what do you mean? Do you mean like LGBT fantasy? What? That's homophobia or something like that?" And I was like, "No, we don't promote bestiality." That had me. Oh gosh, sorry.
So my favorite response is that I've supported a content creator for the last 5 years, and I've legitimately given them about $2,000 of support in 5 years. And so I said, "Hey, could you share it out?" And their response to me is, "Your business is not my brand, so I can't." And this is my response to them. I said, "No worries, you're dead to me." And and I might get sued from Mr. Wonderful on that one on Shark Tank, but the idea is that that's the official response. So if I've supported you and you can't share out my content, not throw me money, legitimately send out a tweet, send out a Facebook post saying, hey, here's your project. Oh, my friend's doing a great project. And I legitimately have given you $2,000 worth of business and you can't even throw me a tweet, you're dead to me. And
Yeah.
so this is how it's going now. And it's very, very interesting in my world where that's the attitude. So, that's what I say to people now. And not to put anybody on blast, but there are people who should be throwing me money at my Kickstarter and they haven't. And not saying I'm going to deny them from coming back on my show, but I'm not so gung-ho and I'm very honest where, it is definitely goes in the back of my head because I keep tabs on everybody. And it's the same thing with all the people who are talking shit about me. It's a small world, guys, in the comic world. And if you talk shit about me and you attack me and you're one of the people really bashing a lot of my rewards, calling me out, I know exactly who you are. In the back of my head, there's an Excel sheet. There's an Excel sheet of all of your stuff. So, yeah, I'm just saying, but I digress. At least I'm honest about it. So,
Yeah. So, pretty much going back before the small note, I contacted a lot of people, was ignore a lot. I contacted the people who had podcasts, YouTube shows, blogs, that focused on the type of content that I share, both being, but like that fit through several niches, which are both indie comics, LGBT comics, girls love comics, Monster Girl content. I contacted a lot of creators who were launching around the same time as me, who maybe had comics of similar genres, proposed to cross promote. I scheduled a lot of shows like weeks and weeks ahead of time, just so that I would be able to like have spots there. I've been posting like all pretty much every day on like all of the social media, pretty much, being Facebook, a million Facebook groups, Twitter, Discord, Reddit, Instagram, like it's been really, really.
So I have a question for you
Yeah.
on the podcast realm, and this is actually very relevant to me
Mm-hmm.
because this is one of the things that I get pushback on, saying, "Oh, you don't have a large audience." Just so everybody's aware, I have returned a lot of capital in my sponsor with a very small audience, so that's not exactly true. But what I do with my interviews is I share it into Facebook groups. I reshoot out my content on a rotating thing on Twitter. It gets onto places like Rumble. It goes into podcast format. It's on YouTube. It gets reshot out onto YouTube. And I tweet out my content constantly. And so my question, and I'm very curious about this, is that when you're on all these shows, and this is the argument I'm trying to make to people, is that, how active do those people actually push out that content? And how big are their audiences? Because the thing that I'm learning is that, I want to be on the right shows. I don't need to be on every show. And I get on people's shows and I'm also changing my entire media where I was on a podcast last night talking nothing about my Kickstarter because my Kickstarter is, while it's relevant and I do need money, my brand is worth a lot more. So I'm very curious about how you view that because this is I think a misconception of, people doing a lot of media where they're like, podcasts don't help me. And my argument to them is saying, you're just not on the right show. You're not in the right environment. You're not working with the right people who have your audience there. My sponsorship with Mix 'em works because I'm legitimately speaking to every indie comic creator. And let's call a spade. People are unhappy with their printing. 50% of the people, whoever you're printing with, are unhappy with their printer. Just by nature. It's just the way it goes, whether that's price, speed, quality, customer service. And so I have every single one of their customers or potential customers legitimately at the start of the interview, both as a listener and as my guest. And that's why I have a sponsorship with Mixem. And I have no problem admitting it because I understood immediately. So I'm curious how you feel about that as this is going to become cut up on Instagram in like 3 days. Just saying. This is the clip.
Well, not a lot of shows that I go on have a big audience. Like some of them maybe have like uh I don't know, like 20 episodes, or like 30 episodes or 50 episodes, but maybe they
They're
have
not
like
like me.
but
Clearly.
maybe they have like I don't know, they post mostly on their website, but they have maybe like I don't know, 5 subscribers on YouTube. Or some of them maybe have like I don't know, 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, but they do like a lot of different content. They don't just do podcast interviews. They also do like game nights or like talk about comics in general, or like do unboxing videos, or like do group things, or like draw streams and stuff like that. And so it's a lot of it's a different experience with a lot of creator podcasts, but also at the same time, because this is the first week after I launched, I've had so many shows in the past week that a lot of them kind of like mesh together in my mind. So sometimes it's like, okay, it's Saturday. Which shows do I have tonight? Pretty much. But there are always some that are good experiences, some that are negative experiences. Um, like a really fun one that I was on recently, like was like classical podcast, but it had and it like talked about comics, but it had like a completely different premise and a completely different way of doing than other podcasts, which made it fun. In which instead of talking about my project and talking about my backstory for the thousandth time, talking about the pitch for the millionth time, they would like put me in a scenario and stuff like, okay, imagine you are in the middle of an alien invasion, and then they would ask me comic related questions based on that. So, like, what kind of comic books would you recommend to the aliens? What kind of content would you bring, to help you survive the invasion? And then, like in between, some regular interview questions to make it interesting. And I remember with my first campaign, I went on this really bad one, which is frustratingly popular. Like they have like 1,000, maybe 2,000, maybe more, I don't remember, subscribers on YouTube, and they publish very regularly. It was so frustrating because like on an hour long episode, the first 5 minutes they asked me to talk about my comic, and then for like the entire rest of the show, while I was there in the background, they just kept yapping and yapping about the new DC and Marvel comics. And at one point, like I tried participating in the conversation, contributing my artistic knowledge with something like, oh, this cover is actually really interesting because of the way it uses golden composition, like the golden spiral in its composition with the characters. And they kind of mansplained me, and I was like, what?
So I don't get on many shows, but I'm also super busy with my own
Mm-hmm.
projects, and I also tend to stay not on YouTube. I like to be in the podcast world because
Mm-hmm.
I have a brand outside of comics, and so like I'm on a show tomorrow talking about money, and to a high schooler themed podcast of what we didn't learn in high school, and I'm going to be talking about money. I'm going to be talking about alternative investing, and so I'm taking a very different approach than everybody else in the comic world because I'm interested in the next year. My goal is to do 100 podcast episodes, and maybe 10 of them are going to be comic related. Because I understand that there's other things, and I'm interested in my brand more so than a quick fix. Because I look at a lot of these shows, and maybe they get 100 plays a year. That doesn't really interest me because you don't help sell my books. I was on somebody's show earlier this week, and that helped to get me funded. But I've been on maybe 2, 3 shows, and who I'm speaking to, nobody's thrown me a dime, and it's a real problem. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
now going to the idea saying, let me go actually build out my base, and let me constantly build out my base for the entire year. And the reason why I ask this is because that's my argument why you should back my Kickstarter, buy a guaranteed guest spot. So I'm actually going to push out your content while it's relevant. And then when it's not relevant, draw attention to your Kickstarter. And then when you run another one in 6 months, they click your Kickstarter, they're going to start following you and be notified more or less when things happen. And I think long term. And this is something that I think people don't understand is that I play the long game. I do not play the short game. I don't
Yeah.
really care that I care that my Kickstarter got funded, but I'm in this game for the next 20 years easy. So it doesn't matter if it got funded or not in reality, because I'm in the podcasting live streaming game for the next 20 years. And so 1 year doesn't matter to me. It's the fact, though, that for the last 10 that I've been doing it, I've been consistent every single year. So that's how I view it, is that I'm looking at large returns over a large amount of time. And I think a lot of people in the Kickstarter world said, I got a short-term problem, which is I need to fund my Kickstarter, versus saying I need to solve a long-term problem that I need my name to come up 100 times in Google every single day. Because I think if people did that on the comic world, I think they would be making more money in indie than anything else.
I think that's also really important when it comes at least to marketing and getting your brand out, to understand your niche and learn how to promote to that niche. Like, I share my posts in like a million different like indie comic Facebook groups every day, and those get very little engagements. However, when I post my content in girl love content groups, monster girl groups, or also on like subreddits related to maybe monster girls, or like LGBT comics and stuff like that, it gets a lot more interaction than when I post in groups related to indie comics. So understanding exactly what your niche is and understanding how to promote to that niche instead of just, like comics in general, is important, and you get a lot more back from that too.
It's also consistency is another big thing.
Yes.
When you're putting out good quality work, there's a theory called critical mass theory,
Mm-hmm.
where, and it's happened to me, where once you reach a certain mass and you get critical mass and you touch enough people, that your content then starts to go viral and it starts to take care of itself. I have another
Mm-hmm.
show that now gets 100 to 120 plays without any marketing every single day in podcast format, because it's reached the stage of critical mass, and I haven't released an episode in almost 18 months. And so it's a very, very interesting position when you get there. Now, that critical mass component could be 100 episodes, it could be 300 episodes, it could be 5,000 episodes. But it's also the idea that I know for a fact that when this show comes into podcast format, I have more than enough content that within a year and a half, I'm going to reach critical mass very, very quickly. And that's what people don't understand either, is that I know exactly what I'm doing in this space. And I get criticized for it, but I also have produced results. But that's a massive aside. This is just really for me, because I'm very interested, because I think a lot of people don't in indie comics understand marketing. And I get it. You're producing a comic, you're writing it, you're paying for everything, you're running the Kickstarter, you're doing all the social media behind it. Then you got to do the fulfillment, you got to do the shipping. And I get it. It's exhausting. And then you say, look, I don't want to do the marketing side of it. I don't want to play the long-term game. I don't want to have to worry about fulfillment. And I completely get that side of it, because it's just, how many hats can you wear all at once? So I get it completely, why things fall apart, why nobody thinks, what does 6, 7, 9 months look down the road for me? And that's all I'm looking at in reality, is I'm looking at the next 12 months. And there's been a lot of changes. It is January 22nd, and my business model in the last 22 days has evolved dramatically, which is terrifying. So that's just how I view everything. But yeah, so that's a big tangent, everybody. That's a big tangent. But I do want to get back to your project. Sorry about that. I do want to get back to your project. And I do want to talk about what's going on with, funding of volumes 1 and 2, and what was that like to really get that going, because volume 1 is 200 pages grayscaled, and volume 2 is, I think, 53 pages and it's fully colored. And what was that like, making that decision? Because going from grayscale to color is a whole different ballgame. And I think it's something that a lot of people do. I've had friends who've had books that have done that. And what was that like for you to make that decision?
Well, when I first started Sunrise Blossom, near the beginning of the story with the original first pages, like the first 120 pages or so, like in the original format, I did it completely in black and white, with some gray tones, like to give a little bit of shaping. But because that is something that doesn't work well on Webtoons, I had to change to color if I wanted to grow. And so the moment that I changed to color, fixed my icon, and fixed the first two episodes on Webtoon, it went boom almost. Like it started like for almost 2 years, I was like stuck between 200 and 220 subscribers. And then I did that change, and like within 6 months, I had reached 1,000 subscribers by then, which was like a really big shift compared to before. And so I had to change the color if I wanted to like grow both on the Webtoons platform but online in general. And when I reached to satisfying conclusion of like the first mega arc of the story, I was like, you know what? This feels long enough. I think I can print it now. But because like roughly a third of the book was originally in just like black and white, and like 2/3 of it was in color, if I wanted to print the book with maybe 1/3 black and white and 2/3 color, I would have to pay as if it were a full color volume, and 220 pages full color is really expensive. So because of the size of the volume, and because it would have been an immense waste of time to go back and color 120 pages, especially where the art, especially maybe like the first 40, 50 pages of those is pretty bad compared to the more recent ones, I decided to just do the first volume in black and white. But because the colors look so good, the second one is going to be in full color, both because since it's a smaller volume and so it's more affordable, I can do it, and it looks a lot nicer.
Yeah, and to even talk about that, because obviously when you're dealing with going from grayscale to color, what is that like? And I don't know if you've gotten feedback from your audience, but how do they feel about that? Because obviously, I don't know if you know Larry Higgins. He was watching a little bit, but his first book was in black and white, and now he's moved to color. And I don't know if he's going back to the original stuff or he's rebooting because he now has a deal with Antarctic Press. But it's this idea that, moving, from black and white and grayscale to color definitely, I think, attracts an audience. I think that an audience likes it. And I think that, it changes the way a comic is perceived. And so what is that like on a personal level and even on a professional level? Because once you get into color, it's like, okay, now you have what a comic is supposed to be to some degree.
Well, I think it's both a like cultural shift and a time shift, kind of. Because like in the 80s and the 90s, most of the comics that circulated were in, well, at least in my area, were black and white, because they were mass printed, and black and white is a lot cheaper than printing in color. And because of this, most of the comics were in black and white. Even manga like chose that it is in grayscale because it's cheaper, and even to this day most manga are like still black and white pretty much. But with the coming of the internet and printing not being like laser printing coming around and being cheaper than ink printing, and with like even printing itself not being as necessary as it was before, because people can read a lot of content on their screen. I have noticed, like in general, like even culturally speaking, all over the world, a gradual shift from mostly black and white comics to full color comics. So even people who like maybe for the first parts of their career mostly worked in black and white, I see many of them, like start working on full colors in their comics. So like for me, it was something that I did mostly because online colors work a lot better. Like they're a lot more statistically they're more successful than black and white comics. But it's something that I have seen happening all over the world.
Yeah, I think there's a shift. I also think people really like colorful things at this point.
Yeah.
And, I think that that's also part of it. And I also think that color sells, and people don't want to have their imagination and go down that path and say, "Oh, what could this look like on a color level?" So I think that's also part of it to some degree.
Yeah,
Um,
also color makes a comic page easier to read, because if it's just black and white, sometimes, especially if maybe it's like a very realistic style comic, the hatching, the details in the background, maybe even like the details on the character's face and clothing can make it a little bit difficult to understand what's going on. So you might like have to focus more on a single panel to better understand what's going on. But with color, like all the hues and saturation are evenly distributed, and so you see and boom, you immediately understand what's going on. And so comics are also faster to read and consume.
Yeah, I think that color definitely helps because color also gives dictation of how a story is going to be played out and all sorts of stuff. And it's really interesting. And I've had a bunch of colorists on, and I've had a lot of conversations, and it is a whole different game, and it can make or break an entire comic in so
Mm-hmm.
many ways. And like I have had Sandra Navagun on, and I've had Claudia Iannicello, she's been on, and obviously she's done a lot of coloring, and then a lot of cover artists color their work. And so this is a very in-depth conversation. When you speak to a colorist for an hour and a half during an interview, we're talking only about color theory. It's very, very interesting in that realm. So I am very well aware. I've never colored a book. I do not ever want to color a book. I will color a book for the sake of saying, hey, I at least tried, but I don't want to publish one. I do not want that job. It is not for me. I can barely draw as it is, let alone do anything else in comics beyond writing. So I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead, everybody. I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. But I do want to talk about your rewards because you got a bunch of rewards coming
Mm-hmm.
with this, and obviously you have a digital, package. So you have volume 2, you have volumes 1 and 2. And so what is that like? Because you're in Europe. I think you're in
Mm-hmm.
Italy or the UK. I
Yeah,
forget.
I'm in Italy.
So what is that like? Because I'm going to say something as nicely as I can say it. I'm in the US and I do not want to pay international shipping.
Well, actually, fear not, Americans who see the euro symbol. It is not your enemy. Because thank you to RJ from Critical Blast, shipping to the US is a lot cheaper than it would otherwise be. So, what I'm going to do when it comes to shipping to the US is that I'm going to, so all the boxes, so all the packages that were ordered from the US are shipped to him, and then he ships them individually from his place, which makes the entire process safer because that way everything can be tracked and no packages can be lost. Faster because they only have to go through customs once, and a lot, and I can't like highlight this enough, a lot cheaper. So instead of spending like, I don't know, $40 for shipping, shipping to the US is only something like $14 for most of the tiers.
And so let's even talk about that because this is the first time I'm hearing of somebody doing it this way. Obviously, I've bought books from Canada. I bought books from, other places. I think I've only actually ordered one thing internationally from Canada twice. And it was like $23 for shipping, and the book itself was like $43. So it was like 66 bucks for the entire thing, and half of it, one third of what I spent was on shipping, and it's pricey. And so what is like there are books that I would love to buy from Australian creators, but I'm like, your shipping is gonna bankrupt me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have to pick and choose, I would much prefer to pick something up that's cheaper, in the US where the shipping is maybe $7 or $10 at the most, or shipping's included. And so what is that like coming up with a solution? Because I think a lot of creators can learn something from you in doing it this way because the US is, I think, the third largest comic market.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. And it's definitely like the biggest pool of people who have bought or who have backed my campaign so far. And well, I chose to go this way because, well, Critical Blast is not only does this logistics favor, but they also do occasionally they interview creators and they chat to creators and stuff. And so I met them through another online show where we were both at, and I heard of his services. And he only started doing this last year, so it's still something that is freshly new, but has been going incredibly well, both for me and for other people. And it's something that I did for the first campaign for volume 1, and it was really wonderful to do, because I overall, like, for something like, I don't know, 10 backers that I had in the US for the first campaign, roughly. Like, for the shipping, I had to pay maybe $50 to ship one big package to him, and then maybe, I don't know, $2 per package to ship from there individually. So if, like, the original package to the US was like $50 for like 10 people, or like maybe it was more, I don't remember, and then like only $2 from there, it was a lot cheaper than having to spend, like $40 per 10 packages individually. And it saved a lot of time, it saved a lot of money, and it's working great. And to anyone who is like maybe not in the US and wants to ship comics to the US, it's something that I also would recommend.
Yeah, I think, it solves a problem, and I think it opens up doors for a lot of people, because let's say you're interested in a book, but you don't want to pay that shipping. That's a big deterrent. And finding a solution to that is so helpful. And I think a lot of creators need to figure that out and figure out that problem. But I do want to focus on the other rewards, and this is the fun stuff. So obviously you have, multiple books. So obviously you could get, the physical book, which is what we're talking about right here. This is volume 1. I think this is volume 2 right here. And then
Yes.
you have a deluxe package, and hopefully I can pull this up where you get a print in that. You get another print in here. There's this in there.
And all the prints are going to be laminated. So I'm going to try to like put extra protection in there to make sure that they don't get like folded and stuff during the shipping. But they're also going to be laminated both to like ensure extra sturdiness, extra protection, and make them like bend and tear free. But also because they're nicer that way, and they're actually worth what the people are paying for the prints, both in the deluxe package and as add-ons.
Yeah, and then there's some other stuff too, and I don't know if there's stretch goals.
Yeah, I've got stretch goals. And we've already, this is Pepper with the first volume.
I want to make it clear, Pepper is not for sale.
Yeah.
Make that crystal clear, everybody. I need to make it crystal clear. So don't ask. Pepper is not for sale. Also Pepper with the bookmark. Pepper, again, is not for sale. Make that crystal clear, okay? I know somebody's going to ask. I just know somebody's going to shoot you like a message on Facebook. I'll be like, I really like Pepper. Can you just remove the bookmark? I just have the cat. Pepper is not for sale. I don't even know if Pepper was for sale, how you would get Pepper if you're in the US, so it's a whole logistics problem. So I'm just letting everybody know that Pepper is not for sale.
So Pepper is not for sale, but Ebony is. I'll drop my PayPal if you want her. I'll give her for whatever you donate. Is okay, even just 50 cents. Take her. She's a bit of a miscreant, that one.
And then there's a few more things I want to show really quickly. There's this.
This one, which was already bought, so it's not available anymore, this one.
And then there's this one. And then there's this one as well. So obviously there's some other stuff too. And then you have some stretch goals, but I don't have any more photos because I'm extremely lazy.
No, it's okay. So the first stretch goal is already reached. So it's a cute sticker of Ivy wearing the maid outfit from Volume 1. So the first stretch goal is already reached. And we're roughly a third through for the second stretch goal.
So obviously you're pushing along, and you got like at least 2 weeks left, right?
Oh, I'm already 1 week in, so I've got something like 22 days left.
Yeah, you got 22 days left. I think I got like 10 left. So obviously that's something that there's plenty of time. You're probably going to reach your second stretch goal very easily.
Fingers crossed, though.
Third, by the time this is done. And so obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, and then you also have retailer packages, which is very helpful. Where I think you have a 10 retail package, and then you have a 20 retail package. And I think it's 5 and 5 for volumes 1 and volumes 2. And then I think it's also with the 20, it's 10 and 10. And so what it's
Well,
that?
I've got one volume 2 retail tier, which is 10 copies of volume 2 for like people like my mom, who already got the retail tier of for just volume 1. And then I've got the retail tier for volume 1 and 2, which is 10 copies of volume 1 and 10 copies of volume 2.
And I'm sure if some store wanted more, you could figure something
Yeah.
out. Or if
Yeah.
some store said, look, we want, 15 copies of volume 1, I'm sure it's figure outable.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
retail tiers are roughly have roughly a 30% discount on cover price.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure, because everybody who runs a retail package, I technically have a retail package with live reads that if somebody wants to buy, and if they want to buy more, there's something that can always be worked out on the back end, or you could always figure out an arrangement to make sure something gets taken care of. There's a million ways how to do that, and a store might say, hey, look, we really like this, but we just want 20 volume 1s, and I'm sure you're more than happy to sell 20 volume 1s to a store.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you're more than thrilled to do that, but I also think it's great to take care of comic shops because there's a shift going on in a bunch of stores. Like there's a store down in Florida called The Collective that carries a lot of indie titles, and so there's a big shift going on. And I buy and sell indie comics, and obviously I'm trying to see if I can work something out with Mike and Trish from Brink and Fetch. Just want to have fun.
Their comics awesome.
Because I just want like legitimately like 10 copies of that Steph Wilson book because I will make good money on that book. Where I know exactly the price point to sell that book at, where I can make money, and I know the price they need to sell to me at, so they can make money and I can make money. And so hopefully we can work out a deal. And we're in discussions. They're on my show, so I could openly say that. I don't think they're going to yell at me or cut me off. But I don't want the nude book. I don't want the nude book because it's a problem on eBay.
Mm-hmm.
Selling nude comics on eBay is rough, and they're cracking down. Everybody, I'm just letting everybody know they're cracking down on that. But I digress. But yeah. So you got a lot of rewards out there. The prints, obviously, bookmarks. I think you have some other stuff. I think people can just add on stuff too if they like particular things. I think I'm missing one of the prints that's in there. I think
Maybe I don't remember.
I think there's 4 prints, right?
Well, there's the volume 1, volume 2, the summer one, the Halloween one, the wedding one. No, so technically you showed all of them.
Oh, maybe I'm not missing something. I wrote your interview on Thursday night, half completely just having a migraine headache. I'm like, great. And it's just so I don't even know what I wrote. And then I didn't look at it till legitimately 20 minutes before we started this interview because I was busy watching Law and Order, which is the greatest show ever. So having said that, obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, and as I stated, you're fully funded. So obviously this project's happening. This project is going to be fully funded. You're going to deliver on everybody who bought their books. And now you're just trying to break stretch goals and add more value. And everything that's done goes down back into the web comic, goes back into printing, goes back in distribution.
Go back into paying my bills a little bit.
that too. That's important. That's what my Kickstarter is about. And here is it's expensive to run StreamYard. It is expensive to run Hootsuite. It is expensive to buy and have equipment. And I would like to have money in case I want to, do something for the business, or I need some consultations or some overlays or even a new logo design. All that stuff goes right into the business. I'm not making money on my podcast through this Kickstarter. I am legitimately keeping it afloat and improving the business. So every dollar goes back into the business. Plus I have expenses with it where I have metal cards and postcards, and that stuff costs money.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that's something that's very important. But I do want to back out of your Kickstarter. If you have money, guys, go back it. So I'm going to say, and I am curious though to talk more technical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you're in Europe. I'm in the United States. I am on the East Coast of the United States in Connecticut. So I'm not that far outside of New York City. I used to live in Washington, D.C. as well during COVID, and then I moved. But what is it like in Europe with COVID? What is it like the convention scene? And what is going on? Because I think that a lot of people don't know what the rest of the world is reacting to COVID and how it's affecting cons and comics and even just everyday business.
Well, as far as I have seen, and with how several of my friends in the US have been, Italy is being a lot more responsible when it comes to conventions than the US. Like, honestly, the US is a giant mess right
Hey, hey,
now.
hey, hey, you know what is when the White House is talking about anime NYC, you're in trouble. You
Uh-huh. So yeah, it's a big mess, like with their mask regulations, the percentage of people who refuse to get vaccinated, well, all that stuff, pretty much. COVID wise, it's a mess. And I have a friend who, in the past 3 weeks, has been to two big conventions, and I'm like, well, here conventions, like I signed up to a bunch of conventions as soon as they started reopening, and now the curve has like gone up a lot, and they keep being postponed, pushed, canceled. Like even the small ones with relatively small audience, with like no more than maybe 500 people coming in and out in one day, like even those ones are getting canceled, or at least postponed currently. Like I was supposed to go to one convention next month, but it was canceled, and then it was moved to April. And then there was one that was originally planned for April, but now is being moved to a later date. And it's like, organization wise, it's a mess, but they are being a lot more responsible than in some other countries.
I mean, in the U.S., it's crazy, and you have a lot of freedom in the United States, and you know what it is? It's a disaster, and it's gonna be figured out one way or the other, and the free market's gonna fix that problem. I'm a very free market guy, and we're about to see what happens in the United States, and that's pretty much where we're going, and who knows what's going to happen, but I'm not interested in going to cons per se because my business is online. And if I could sell to 350 million people versus selling to 20 at a con, and I've said this before, where there's a lot of reasons where I am digitalization 2.0. And I am part of that pivot where I want to sell completely online. And I want to be almost like, I want to be 90% exclusive online. I do not want to be at cons, even when they reopen, because I would rather have a bigger digital footprint and sell in a variety of ways. That I think there's just more money for my business on the internet. So
That
that's
is true, but like cons, sadly, they're not for the money at all. Like I've been to several cons, like especially in like 2018, and I like most of the times I didn't even make enough money to cover the cost of the gas and the bed and breakfast, pretty much. But I did go mostly because it was a fun experience. It was nice to talk to people,
so
network, make friends with other people tabling,
this is
sharing
this
experiences. Hmm.
is how I view it, is that if you're going for fun and it's a business expense for a fun event and that's what you want to do on your vacation, and then you're selling some comics and maybe your table pays 60% is sort of paid with what you're selling, and you're making it work, and even when you calculate your expenses you're only in the hole for 40%, but you viewed it as a vacation slash work vacation and business and a hybrid of all three. That's fine. But for me, I'm making business decisions where I'm like, this is what would I want to do as a business. And so everything in my world has to make money now. So like when I buy a comic book to sell on eBay, it is a business decision. There is business decisions and things of that nature with what I'm doing, and that's fine. So if I go to a con, it has to be economical for me. And look, it's economic to be meeting the right person could be worth every penny. That could be an economic decision, but it's at the same time I'm smart enough to know. But that's just me. I'm a unique breed at this point, and I'm also too business oriented. So like when I run a Kickstarter, it is a business decision. It is not a comic book decision. And I am in the business of creating wealth and making money. So if I buy cover art that for $1,000 and I hire somebody, I'm expecting 10,000 out of that cover to sell when it's all through within a 2.5 year period. So like this is all just how I function now, and it's good and bad, and it's unfortunate because again, it's not I function more like DC and Marvel and Image than I function like an indie comic publisher, and it's an unfortunate side effect of what happens sometimes. But I digress. But that kind of leads me into my next question with Kickstarter. And obviously, Kickstarter, when we talk about Webtoons being saturated, Kickstarter is also saturated. And this is one of the pushbacks is that a lot of people are hitting up, can I be a guest in your show? And I'm going to say something very, very nice, is that not everybody's project deserves to be on my show. Not everybody's project is good enough or up to the quality of work that I want to push out there. And so, and there's a lot more projects on Kickstarter. So how do you feel about Kickstarter and sustainability and a variety of other things going on with Kickstarter? Because I go on Kickstarter, there's like 300 projects right now in comics, and probably 100 too many.
Well, I don't rely on Kickstarter to be funded because if I just rely on Kickstarter to be funded, like I put it on Kickstarter and wait for the money to come in, money isn't going to come in. So for me, Kickstarter is mostly just a platform to gather the funds. And then with marketing, going to shows, posting daily on multiple platforms, advertising, from all those other things, I bring the people to the Kickstarter in order for it to get funded. And I don't rely on Kickstarter, to get the money. Like Kickstarter for me is just a platform where I can share the project and like redirect people to in order to be funded. And both because I decided to have a relatively small goal. So the goal that I chose was like the bare minimum that was necessary to cover the cost of printing 100 copies in English, 100 copies in Italian, and cover the general shipping costs. And I spent like a couple months before launching, like promoting like in a lot of different places. Like I share like memes almost every day in the 2 weeks before the campaign, to like help promote and things like that. And mostly because of all the pre-launch promotion that I pushed out, I was able to be fully funded in about 2 hours. And a couple days later, because it was funded so quickly, and because the page itself is decently presented, we were able to get on Kickstarter's Project We Love list, which is like an extra boost on the website itself. But unlike with places like Webtoons, where it works a little bit differently, I don't rely on Kickstarter to give me the money, but I only use it as a platform to bring the people in who are interested in the project.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm well aware with my Kickstarter that a lot of work needed to get done beforehand, and it should have. And my Kickstarter was a very, very, very rough, disaster, and she's getting antsy. Everybody, so but she's gonna have to tough it out for the rest of the day.
Well, it's okay. Pepper also came to say hi.
Mommy and Daddy, I'm in charge, and we get to do things my way today.
Look, he has resting bitch face.
But it's I don't rely solely on Kickstarter, in which that my season 3 is actually already funded outside of Kickstarter. Kickstarter for me is just more money that furthers that when a sponsorship runs out or doesn't decide to renew, I have another season ready to be funded. And I'm going to be coming back for season 4. But I'm going to start building out season 4's campaign in August of this year. So in about 7 months, I'm going to start building out that campaign page. Is going to be up in September, and you're going to see me promoting like crazy. September, October for a launch in November, because I've now figured out that I understand my whole problem with my Kickstarter. And so, but I'm not solely relying on Kickstarter. Kickstarter is monetization track B for me. And that's
Well, there's also a lot of trial and error when it comes to doing projects like this for the first time?
Oh, it's okay, Hopi. It's okay. It's all right. We're almost done, Hope. I promise. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And I should have been promoting way ahead of time. And I don't want to go into my entire disaster of a Kickstarter, but it was complicated to say the least. To say the least, where I was supposed to launch in November, but hiccups happened. And that's why I launched in January. But it's been good so far. I am $10 over my goal. So, and I think I'll get another 60 if I don't do anything. So I think I'll convert because I have only 10 people converted and I have a 33% conversion rate, which is decent. So that's where I'm at. And that's pretty much where I'm at. But obviously, I do want to give you a chance for self-promotion. So where can people find you? Where can people find the Kickstarter? Where can people read it on Webtoons? And even going further out of this, where can people, if I didn't already say it, probably on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, because that's just as important as backing projects now.
So I've got a million different social medias that I use, and you can find them all on my link tree, which is linktr.ee/Nina D. Aberlein. And there you can find my Kickstarter page, even the YouTube trailer of the Kickstarter, my Patreon, Webtoon, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, newsletter, tapas, Discord server, Fur Affinity, and Facebook page.
It's in the comments, everybody, so you can check out the comments. And I'm pretty sure if you just Google Nina, you'll be able to find her somewhere, and then social media leads to other social media. But it's in the comment section down below. I'll probably just put it up into the notes after we're done here, and so that everybody can catch it there as well. And so obviously there's a lot of places that you can find Nina, and then also the Kickstarter is up there. So please go check out and click the Kickstarter. If you're going to click any social media, obviously check out the Kickstarter, see if it's for you. Apparently we learned that shipping is not going to kill you from Italy. So that's a good thing, where you're not going to be paying $40 or $30 to ship a book. You're going to be paying more like $15 or $20, which is a big difference at most. So obviously that's something that's very helpful. So go back to that Kickstarter, and I've been saying it to everybody, is that you have to support indie. And what that means is you obviously have to back Kickstarters when they're live, and then you have to share out that you back the Kickstarter. Because if you back a Kickstarter and you let somebody else know they back the Kickstarter, they're more likely to then back that Kickstarter. Or you say, hey, this is a really cool project. Check it out, everybody. It goes a long way. You know, when I post things up in groups of people's Kickstarters, people actually go and back those Kickstarters that I push out. And so obviously that's a big deal. But let's say money's tight, because obviously I've been in positions where money is tight. And the best thing you can do in those circumstances is share it out, because it goes a long way. And that's very important as well. Also, following people on social media, the link trees up there, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, anywhere else, that also is helpful. Signing for people's newsletters, very helpful, and a variety of other things. So we actually go do all of that, and you should be doing all of it, or at least doing one of those things. Furthermore, about me, just really quickly, I'm going to promote myself. Obviously, you can check out my Kickstarter. You know, if you're looking for live reads, ads, guaranteed guest spots, very important. You know, my goal is 200 interviews this year, and 50 of them are cosplayers, and another 50 of them are wrestlers, which means there is about 100 spots for comic people. So there is limited on who's getting on my show this year. And so a lot of people can buy a guest spot, and there's only 30 of those out there. On top of that, then the rest are going to be handpicked by me, or you can request to be on. And if I like your project, you'll get on. So that's something that's very important. And then even going further, obviously you could go use Mixum to print your book. You can also use BCW supplies, pop out any comps at checkout, and all that stuff matters. So go do support me, support that, support, you know, Nina and her Kickstarter, because it does go a long way. I think that if you like girls kissing, you'll be perfectly fine with this book. I am slightly preoccupied because I have her and she's being beyond antsy.
Oh.
So sorry, everybody. She is being beyond antsy. This is
Oh, it's okay. I've also got my youngest cat right here under the table here, like clawing at my legs.
Are you happy now? Hope you have to sniff my ear. Are you happy? Anyway, I'm going to give you now a chance for the final word because clearly I am not going to be handling this child anymore. Because I think having a baby would be a lot easier in this interview. So having said that, I'm going to give you the final word. Whatever you have to say, it's yours.
Be excellent to each other, and to still quote Bill and Ted, party on, dudes.
And I think that is a wrap.